My sister betrayed me with my boyfriend. My parents supported her and abandoned me. But when my father died, he left everything only to me. And now they're begging for money while my ex stalks them and gets arrested. I'm 24 years old. I work in digital marketing. And honestly, I don't even know where to start with all of this, because what happened with my family basically destroyed me in a way I never thought was possible. The thing is that like 3.5 years ago, I was in a relationship with a guy named Nathan. We'd been together for about a year, and I thought things were going really well. You know, one of those relationships where you think you finally found someone worthwhile. I decided to introduce him to my family because, well, I come from a pretty close-knit family, or so I thought, with my mom, who was always kind of traditional and obsessed with appearances, my dad, who was more laid back, my sister Samantha, who was like 19 at the time, and my baby sister Abby, who was barely 8 years old and was the sweetest of all of us. The first time Nathan came over, everything seemed normal, like my mom asking him a million questions about his job and his future plans, my dad trying to be the intimidating father but failing because he was too nice, and my sisters just hanging around being curious. Samantha, in particular, seemed super interested in getting to know him, which didn't seem weird to me at the time because she was always like that, very social and friendly with everyone. But looking back, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there and I just didn't want to see them. After that first visit, we started going to my parents' house more often, like every 2 or 3 weeks. And I noticed that Samantha always found excuses to be around Nathan, like she needed help with her computer, or could he teach her something about his work? Stuff like that, which seemed innocent at the moment but now makes me sick just remembering it. Everything went to hell one night when we were at my apartment watching a movie. Nathan had fallen asleep on the couch and his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I thought it might be something work-related because sometimes he had emergencies, so I grabbed it to wake him up and tell him. But the screen lit up and I saw a message from my sister. And it wasn't a normal message like, "Hi, how are you?" It was something completely different. I started scrolling through the conversation. I know it was wrong, but in that moment, instinct took over. And what I found literally knocked the air out of me. There were messages from weeks back, flirty messages, sexual innuendos, her sending him photos, him telling her things he was supposed to only tell me. And there was one in particular where she said something about the last time they were together and how much she wanted to do it again. I just stood there in the middle of the living room with the phone in my hand shaking. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. And when Nathan woke up and saw me with his phone, his face went white, like he immediately knew it was all over. I don't remember exactly what I screamed at him. I think it was a lot of incoherent stuff mixed with crying and rage. He tried to explain himself with the typical excuses that it was a mistake, that he'd had too much to drink one night, that it didn't mean anything. But I couldn't listen to him anymore. All I wanted was for him to get out of my apartment and out of my life. I kicked him out that same night, literally threw his stuff out the window and told him if he didn't leave, I was calling the police. I'd never felt so much rage and betrayal at the same time. It was like my chest was going to explode and my head wouldn't stop spinning, thinking about all the moments I'd trusted both of them. All the times Samantha had hugged me and told me I was the best sister in the world while she was sleeping with my boyfriend behind my back. The next day, I drove like 3 hours to my parents' house. I got there around 9 inches the morning without warning. I knocked on the door, and when my mom opened it and saw my face, she knew something was really wrong. Samantha was having breakfast in the kitchen with my dad and Abby. And when I walked in and saw her sitting there so calm like nothing had happened, something inside me just exploded. I screamed everything I'd discovered at her, showed her the screenshots I'd taken of Nathan's phone. My parents were in absolute shock. My dad turned red with anger, and my mom started crying. Abby didn't understand what was happening and just looked at me scared. Samantha at first tried to deny everything, said I was exaggerating, that they were just silly messages. But when my parents saw the photos and the explicit messages, she couldn't keep lying. So she changed tactics and started saying that Nathan had manipulated her, that she was the victim, that he had taken advantage of her. My dad kicked her out of the house that same day, told her she had a week to find somewhere to live, and that he didn't want to see her until she reflected on what she'd done. My mom was devastated but supported the decision, or so it seemed at the time. I stayed with them a couple of days, because honestly, I couldn't be alone in my apartment. Everything reminded me of Nathan and the betrayal. Abby wouldn't leave my side and kept asking me why Samantha had done something so horrible, and I didn't even know what to tell her, because I didn't understand it myself. Like 2 weeks passed and Samantha was living with a friend. My parents weren't talking to her and neither was I. I thought the family was finally on my side and that things would eventually get better. But then Samantha called my parents and told them she was pregnant, that the baby was Nathan's, and that she didn't know what to do. My mom softened immediately. Started with the speech about how there was an innocent baby in all this now, that we had to think about the future, that family is the most important thing, all that stuff you've probably heard a million times. My dad was still angry, but my mom convinced him to let Samantha come back home, at least until the baby was born. And when I found out about that, I felt like I'd been betrayed all over again, like everything I'd suffered didn't matter just because now there was a pregnancy involved. I told them that if they let Samantha come back home, I was never going to step foot in that house again, that they had to choose. But my mom said I was being selfish and dramatic, that I couldn't ask them to abandon their pregnant daughter. So basically, they cut me off. Or I cut them off. I don't know. The line is blurry in these situations. The only thing I maintained was contact with Abby. My cousin would tell me how things were at home because she still visited. And that's how I found out about everything without having to talk directly to my parents or Samantha. Nathan and Samantha officially started dating like 2 months after the scandal, because I guess there was no point in hiding anymore. And my mom was suddenly happy because she was going to be a grandmother. As if nothing else mattered. They got married when Samantha was, like 6 months pregnant, a small wedding in my parents' backyard. And of course, my mom told all the guests that I couldn't make it because I was working in another state. Basically lied so Samantha wouldn't look bad, so no one would know the truth of what had happened. My cousin sent me photos secretly, and seeing Samantha in that white maternity dress and Nathan next to her smiling turned my stomach. But at the same time, I was so emotionally numb by then that I didn't even cry. I just saved the photos and got on with my life. The baby was born in December, a girl who, according to my cousin, was identical to Samantha, and obviously my mom was obsessed with her first grandchild. She'd post photos on Facebook all the time, and everyone would comment how beautiful the family was. Nobody knew the shit that had gone down to get to that point. I still wasn't talking to any of them except Abby, who was like 9 years old by then and would call me every week in secret because my parents didn't want her to have contact with me. They said I was a bad influence and that I was filling her head with negative ideas about Samantha. Like 2 years went by like that. Me working, trying to rebuild my life, dating other people, but never really being able to trust anyone after what had been done to me. And then in March last year, my cousin called me crying to tell me my dad had died. It was a sudden heart attack. He was at work and collapsed. They took him to the hospital but couldn't do anything. I was in shock because nobody had told me my dad was sick. Turns out he'd had heart problems for months, but the family decided not to tell me anything because they assumed I wouldn't want to know or that I'd cause problems. Basically, they completely excluded me from my own father's illness. I went to the funeral, obviously, and it was weird and horrible at the same time. My mom barely spoke to me. Samantha shot me hateful looks the whole time. Nathan was there with his daughter in his arms, trying to stay away from me, and Abby ran to hug me as soon as she saw me and didn't let go during the entire ceremony. There was so much tension you could cut it with a knife. People were looking at us trying to understand what was going on, and I just wanted it all to be over so I could get out of there. After the burial, there was a gathering at my mom's house for coffee and condolences. I didn't want to go, but my cousin convinced me, saying it was the right thing to do, that my dad would have wanted me to be there. The will reading was like 2 weeks later. They called us all to my dad's lawyer's office, an older guy who'd been a family friend for years. When he started reading, I wasn't paying much attention. Honestly, I was more focused on not looking at Samantha and Nathan, who were sitting on the other side of the room. But then the lawyer got to the part about the distribution of assets, and everything got weird. My dad had left me 40% of everything. Abby 30%, my mom 20%, and Samantha barely 10%. We all went silent. My mom looked confused, Samantha went pale, and Nathan clenched his jaw. I couldn't believe what I was hearing because I didn't expect to receive anything, considering I hadn't talked to my dad in years. The lawyer kept reading and explained that my dad had modified the will like 6 months before he died, when he already knew his heart was bad, and that he'd left specific instructions that the distribution couldn't be changed under any circumstances, that he'd thought a lot about how to divide his assets, and this was his final will. The total amount was considerable because my dad had been a really good money manager. There were investments, savings, the house, a small business. Basically, it was an inheritance that would change your life if you knew how to use it well. Samantha exploded right there in the lawyer's office, started screaming that it wasn't fair, that I'd abandoned the family and didn't deserve anything that she'd been there for. In my dad in his final years while I ignored him. My mom tried to calm her down, but it was clear she was also upset with my dad's decision. Nathan was saying they had to contest the will, because obviously my dad wasn't in his right mind when he modified it. The lawyer told them they could try whatever they wanted, but the will was perfectly drawn up, that my dad had been completely lucid, and that he'd included a clause saying that if anyone tried to contest it, they would automatically lose their share and it would be redistributed among the others. I got out of that office as fast as I could. I didn't want to keep hearing Samantha's screams or Nathan's accusations. I got in my car and drove aimlessly for like an hour trying to process everything. I didn't understand why my dad had done that, why he'd given me the largest share if we weren't even talking. And then I remembered that the lawyer had mentioned my dad had left a personal letter for me. He'd given it to me in a sealed envelope, before everything went to hell. I got to my apartment and opened the letter. It was like 3 pages, handwritten by my dad. And basically it said that he never stopped loving me, that he understood why I'd cut contact with the family, that he knew Samantha and my mom had hurt me badly, that he'd also been angry with Samantha, but that my mom had pressured him to forgive her and accept her back. He wrote that he regretted not defending me more, letting my mom make all the decisions about how to handle the situation, that he wanted me to have financial security because he knew I'd been working hard to get ahead on my own. The part that broke me the most was when he wrote that he hoped someday I could forgive him for not being the father I needed in the most difficult moment of my life, and that this inheritance was his way of trying to make up for all the damage they'd caused me. I cried like I hadn't cried in years reading that letter. I felt so much anger and sadness and relief all mixed together that I didn't even know what to do with all those emotions. On one hand, I was furious with my dad for not defending me when I needed it most, but on the other hand, I understood he'd been in an impossible position between my mom and me, and at least in the end, he'd tried to do the right thing in his own way. The problem started like a week after the will reading. Nathan started sending me messages saying we needed to talk, that what my dad had done wasn't fair to Samantha and his daughter, that I had to be reasonable and divide the inheritance more equitably. I blocked him immediately because I wasn't going to have any conversation with him about anything, but then he started sending me messages from other numbers, from Samantha's phone, from friends' numbers saying I was being selfish and cruel to my niece who was going to need that money for her education and future. My mom also started calling me, leaving voicemails saying I had to think about the family, that my dad would have wanted us to stay united, that this was destroying what little was left of our relationship. I told her clearly that I wasn't going to give up anything my dad had left me, that that had been his decision and I was going to respect it, and that if she had problems with it, she could talk to my dad's ghost, because I wasn't going to change my mind. Things escalated quickly after that. One night, I got to my apartment after work and found all 4 tires on my car slashed, completely destroyed, and there was a note on the windshield that said something like, "You're going to regret being so greedy." I called the police. They made a report but said without evidence they couldn't do much. I knew it had been Nathan or someone he'd sent, but I had no way to prove it. The next day, I started receiving threatening messages from blocked numbers. Things like, "Watch out when you go out at night," or "We know where you live." Messages that had me really scared. I told my lawyer everything and he recommended I get a restraining order. So I compiled all the messages, the photos of my car, all the evidence I had, and presented it in court. The judge granted me a temporary restraining order against Nathan, which obviously made him worse because now he was really furious. Samantha sent me a message saying I'd ruined her life and her daughter's, that I was a bitter bitch who couldn't let others be happy. Then something happened that still gives me chills just thinking about it. Like 2 weeks after getting the restraining order, I received a package at my apartment. It had no return address, and that already made me nervous. But I opened it because sometimes I received work stuff and thought it might be that. Inside was a notebook, like one of those regular notebooks you buy at any stationery store. And when I opened it, I saw it was full of notes about me, my schedules, my routines, where I went to eat, what time I left work, who I hung out with. There were specific dates and times, even photos of me that someone had taken without me realizing it, photos at the supermarket, photos walking down the street, photos at a cafe. It scared me so much that I literally started shaking. Someone had been following me for weeks or maybe months and had documented everything meticulously. I called the police immediately. They came and took the notebook as evidence. The officer who took my statement said this was serious harassment and they were going to investigate. He suggested I consider moving temporarily to a place where nobody knew my address, like a hotel or with a trusted friend. That night, I packed some things and went to a hotel in another part of the city. I didn't tell anyone where I was except my cousin and my lawyer. I didn't even tell Abby because I was afraid my mom or Samantha would find out somehow. I was like 3 days in that hotel. I barely slept because every noise scared me. I ordered room service because I didn't want to go out. I was completely paranoid and terrified, and rightfully so, it turns out, because what happened next confirmed all my fears. It was like 2 in the morning on the 4th day at the hotel. I was half asleep, looking at something on my phone when I heard noises outside my room, like someone was trying to force the lock. I completely froze, grabbed my phone and called the front desk, whispering that there was someone trying to get into my room. I also called 911 and told them the same thing. And while I was talking to the operator, I could hear more noises, like they were using some tool to open the door. Hotel security arrived before the police and found Nathan out there with a lockpick in his hand. They detained him immediately, and when the police arrived, they arrested him right there. Turns out Nathan had hired a private investigator to follow me. That was the notebook I'd received, a copy of the surveillance report, but when they gave him the restraining order, the investigator didn't want to keep working with him anymore, so Nathan decided to do it himself. He'd found out what hotel I was at, I don't know how because I'd been super careful, and decided he was going to confront me or scare me, or I don't know what shit he had planned. They charged him with violating the restraining order, attempted breaking and entering, and aggravated harassment. He was detained for like 2 days until Samantha paid his bail. My lawyer said this made our case much stronger, and that Nathan would probably end up with serious criminal charges. And sure enough, the prosecutor decided to proceed with the case because there was enough evidence of systematic harassment and threats. All this was like 8 months ago. Nathan is waiting for trial. Last I heard, he was facing possibly 2 years in prison, if they find him guilty of all charges. And Samantha obviously blames me for everything. Says I caused all of this by clinging to money I didn't deserve. I moved to a new apartment in a building with good security, changed cars, basically started from scratch as far as my daily life goes. My mom tried to contact me a couple more times, but I don't respond anymore. Abby is now 11 years old and we still talk. But she has to do it secretly because my mom took away her phone when she found out she was calling me. My cousin is basically my only link to what's left of the family. And honestly, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes I think it would be easier to cut completely with everything and forget those people exist. The inheritance was finalized like 3 months ago, after the lawyer made sure everything was in order and that nobody else was trying to contest the will. I paid off my debts, invested most of the money, bought myself a new car and a bigger apartment, and set aside a fund for Abby for when she turns 18 and wants to go to college or whatever she needs. I didn't spend the money on crazy stuff or anything dramatic. Basically used it to have stability and security, which was exactly what my dad wanted me to do according to his letter. I still have days where I have a hard time believing all this actually happened. That my own sister was capable of betraying me that way. That my parents chose to support her instead of me. That Nathan turned out to be a complete psychopath willing to stalk and threaten me over money. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different, if I'd been more flexible, if I'd agreed to divide the inheritance differently. But then I remember everything they did to me, all the pain they caused me, and I know I didn't owe them anything. Last week, Abby sent me a message saying she misses how the family was before, when we were all happy. And I had to explain to her that that family never really existed the way she remembers it, that there were always problems under the surface. She was just too young to see them. And she asked me if we could ever all be together again. And honestly, I didn't know what to answer her, because the truth is, I don't think that's possible. There are things that simply can't be repaired, and this is one of them. I told her I'll always be there for her no matter what, that when she turns 18 and can make her own decisions, we'll be able to see each other more often without her having to hide, and that seemed to calm her down a bit. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive Samantha or my mom or Nathan. Honestly, right now I don't even feel like trying. I'm focused on my life, on my work, on rebuilding my ability to trust people. I started therapy like 6 months ago, and that's helped a lot. It's helping me process all the trauma and betrayal without letting it consume me completely. My therapist says it's normal to feel anger and resentment, that I don't have to rush to forgive anyone if I'm not ready, that the important thing is that I'm taking steps to take care of myself, and that's what matters now. I guess if anyone reads this and is going through something similar, the only thing I can tell you is that it's okay to set your boundaries, it's okay to cut contact with toxic family, and it's okay to defend what's yours. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself, because at the end of the day, you're the most important thing, and nobody else is going to take care of you if you don't do it first. And if your family betrays you the way mine betrayed me, you're not obligated to forgive them just because you share their blood. Sometimes the best family is the one you choose, not the one you got by chance.